Photo School Holiday Education Event. We're finishing off this afternoon again with our great partners from FujiFilm. We've got the team of Michael, Lewis, and Barney online, and our special guest tonight, Brandon Ruffin, street photographer extraordinaire. He's got a great presentation on how to photograph people and strangers and the equipment that he uses and some great images as well. So we're looking forward to that. Before we get started, I just want to remind you all that Sammy's Cameras is open. We are practicing all social distancing protocols for in-store shopping. We have touchless curbside pickup available for those who prefer that. And we're always open 24/7 on Sammys.com for all your photographic and holiday gift needs. So with that, I will turn it over to the FujiFilm folks and let you guys take it away. Thanks.
I guess I will say thank you for taking the time for being here. My name is Barney with FujiFilm. We got our two technical specialists, Michael Bobenko and Louis Navarro. So please feel free to chat in any questions. And I'm sure Brandon will answer any questions that are more specific to him. But again, welcome. And I think you're in for a treat with Brandon. So we'll turn it over to you, Brandon.
Brandon, would you like to answer questions at the end, or you prefer pausing between your presentation?
Yeah, let's do it at the end, just in case anybody has any questions relevant to maybe a picture they saw or a concept that I talked about. And I'm going to even just set my set a stopwatch now so I can kind of keep up with the time and make sure I leave time for everyone to get some comments in.
Excellent. So everybody down below under chat, please, if you have questions, please enter in chat room, and either ourselves will answer the question. If it's pertaining to Brandon, we'll definitely forward those questions to Brandon.
It's all yours, Brandon.
All yours.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Sammy's. Thank you, FujiFilm, for inviting me to be here. I always love speaking about photography. I think everyone in this room here can account for being a photography fanatic, as we spend our hard-earned cash and money and time on photography equipment, and for the street photographers out there running around in the streets, and the landscape folks out there in the cold winter weather, so we all make our sacrifices for this art that we love. And so I love to talk about it. I love to be talking about it with other photographers and photography fans. So again, I'm very humbled to be here. I'm honored to be here, and hopefully some of the things that I talk about today, you guys can utilize out there as you're taking photographs of people, or even if some of these things relate to other aspects of photography. It's all connected. And so I hope that it can, something that from the day that I say or talk about can be helpful. And that's that. So let's get started. My name is Brandon Ruffin. I am a portrait photographer based out of Oakland, California. I really focus in on taking photographs in sort of a photojournalistic space, where I like to get out into the streets and out in the neighborhoods, out into different towns, and talking to people and sharing human stories. That's a big thing for me. And in turn, I share my story with the people who I talk to photograph, and by giving them my authentic self, I'm hoping I'm going to get something very authentic back from them. I have been taking photographs since 2005, and this year I have the honor of being added to the FujiFilm X photographer roster, which was for me a huge accomplishment and a culmination of a lot of hard work and a lot of time, and just being a little bit lucky and in the right place at the right time. So that's a little bit about me. Let's get to the photos. I stole this little piece off of Wikipedia because I thought it really captured, in essence, a very great description of what portraiture is. So a portrait is a painting, a photograph, a sculpture, or other artistic representation of a person in which the face and its expression is predominant. The intent is to display the likeness, personality, and even the mood of the person. For this reason, in photography, a portrait is generally not a snapshot, but a composed image of a person in a still position. A portrait often shows a person looking directly at the painter or photographer in order to most successfully engage the subject with the viewer.
Hey, Brandon.
Yep.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Are you just reading, or is there supposed to be a slide we're supposed to be seeing?
There's supposed to be a slide there. You're not seeing anything?
No. Can you advance to your next slide?
I did. On my screen, it shows it's advanced.
Stop your share and restart it.
Okay, let me do that now.
And make sure you select the actual, there we go. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
Thank
so in that description, I think it really captures very well what most people are looking for, most artists are looking for out of a portrait, rather you're a painter, a photographer, a sculptor, or any of the other more abstract ways in which people can create a portrait of someone. It's typically getting fairly close and capturing the person, the human body, the face, the bust of a person is the subject. And so that's what we get most of in the photo. And as we talk about portraits, we will discuss objects and making other things part of the photo. But for the most part, a portrait is focusing in on the person. It can also, if you're doing like animal portraiture, like pet portraiture, things like that. But your subject, your living, breathing subject is in essence what we're focused in on. Now, I took an image of Rembrandt, obviously one of the great portrait artists of in human history, not just for the way he composed photos, but obviously for his lighting, which is something that as photographers and even in the cinema world, constantly replicating that lighting, which was just brilliant. And then I put in a photo of my own that I took some years back in Oakland. Now I chose these two particular images, one to show that a lot of times portraiture can come in the spirit of, and also following in sort of the artistic footsteps of paintings. But also, if you look at the last part of that that description of portraiture, it talks about, you know, how often it's the subject looking straight at the photographer, the lens, or the painter. And I think that that's a valid point, and there is a point in time where you're going to utilize that. It's going to be very effective. But I also want to remind you that sometimes having a moment where someone's not looking directly at the camera or you, the painter, is just as impactful, and is sometimes even more impactful with what you're trying to say with the story. And so, you know, as I talk about these things, I'm going to be talking about more so my experience on portraiture, and also things that are not rules. None of these things I'm going to talk about today would I consider a rule. These are things that I've utilized throughout my years of taking photos of people, and, you know, through trial and error have given me, you know, more consistent and better results over time. So don't think of any of these things as things that I'm describing as rules. They're just my experience, and I just want to share that with you guys today. And it won't be overly technical. I don't want to get too much into the techniques of photography, although we'll cover them. I don't want this to become a highly technical talk, but more so things that I've experienced I think will make your work out there more impactful, and also make it easier for you to have more tools in the tool bags that'll make it easier for you to engage with people out on the street. There we go. And did that next slide advance? I hope it's not making the same issue.
Oh, it's good. It says street portraiture.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, wonderful. So I thought that I would add my own sort of definition to what I consider street portraiture, or at least what, you know, sort of the elements that you're going to be dealing with. It's the process of capturing the image of a stranger, or still representation of a stranger taken in an environment that exists outside the direct control of the photographer. During this process, the photographer must negotiate multiple variables to include environment, social and emotional engagement, and the physical manipulation of the camera. All right, so these are the things that I most often, and I think any street photographer, but in particular street portrait photographer, will find that they're dealing with. And what I mean by environment that exists outside of your direct control is that when you're out there and you're looking for your subjects, you're going to be in a place where you may not, well, you will not have control, not the way you would have in a studio, right? You're going to be out there trying to find good locations that'll give you pleasant backgrounds, make things that are going to allow you to not have too much busyness behind your subject, right? We want to make sure that we know who and what the subject is. But on top of that, you're going to want to find a space where you can sort of direct your subject into light that is already provided. There are ways to go out, obviously, with a few different tools to amplify the light that's existing and sort of direct that light, right? Light modification devices, something like a bounce or a reflector, or something to diffuse with. But for the most part, what you get out there is what you get. We don't have the same advantages of being inside the studio where we can have multiple lights and different light modifiers to more directly control the light. And so part of what you're doing is making observations to how you're going to best try to replicate those principles that you would use inside the studio, but without having all the same measures of control to do that with. And also, I'm sorry, did not mean to advance that slide, but we're fine. Also, we're going to be thinking about the emotional and social engagements that are happening out there on the street. Those are huge. Those are the biggest indicators of us getting the photo we want, right? Because if we're out there and we're taking street portraits, most likely you are a subscriber to a more documentary and photojournalistic style of thinking about your work. And so we want to capture people in their element, and we want to do the best we can to capture the person that we had in front of us in that moment, right? I don't subscribe to the idea that you're going to capture the entire essence of a human being in one photo. I think it's impossible. And it also sort of takes away from the idea of the complexity of the complex nature of being a human being. I think is impossible to capture all of that into one photo. But what you can do, and what I strive to do, and what I think everyone should be striving to do when they're taking these portraits out on the street, is that you should be doing the best you can to represent the best parts of that person and the most accurate parts of that person while you have them. And I put this slide in here to make you realize, like, it's hard. Street portraiture is difficult. It's hard, not because of the camera, but because of the very act of bravery that is approaching a stranger with a camera. So be patient with yourself and be prepared to be told no. The best advice I can give people in going through this process is to approach people who you want to take photos, especially if this is like in the beginning of your journey as a portrait photographer. Approach people. If you're struggling to talk to people, if you're struggling to find that courage to go out there and try to engage with people out on the street, especially people you don't know, walk up to them and start a conversation. Do all that and don't ask them for the picture. Find somebody you really want a picture of and then talk to them. Be a genuine human being with them, engage with them, offer yourself, let them offer themselves back to you, and then just go away. Don't ask for that picture, because you want to learn what it feels like to really want the picture and not get it, and still be able to do all the human things that we should be doing out there. The photography in general, I always think, is always about human beings, regardless of what the subject matter is. And if you're taking portraits of people, that's very much connected to being a human being. And so we want to never make it sterile, or we don't want to make it a surgical environment. We want to make it something that is very human. And so in that, when you're talking to people and you're in this rush to get your yes or no answer, then your subject's going to pick up on that. And if they pick up on that, you're going to get a no sometimes when maybe you would have gotten a yes, or you're not going to get them comfortable. I think that one of the most effective things that comes from my portraits is that you can tell that my subject is comfortable, not because necessarily I made them that way, but because I came into the situation honest. I came into the situation genuine. And so try to focus in on that. You do that for a little while. You go there and you want to get this photo badly, but then you leave only offering them a good conversation, a good human, genuine conversation. Then when you go back out and you do the same thing and you get told no, you will have effectively already developed all the tools you need to continue on with that conversation, right? You walk up to someone and say, hey, I'm Brandon Ruffin. I'm a street portrait photographer. I'd love to take a portrait of you. Could I? And they say no. Well, I could pack up my bags and walk off to the next person. but that confirms something for my subject. One, that I only wanted one thing from them, which was their photo. I was not genuinely interested in them. And two, that ends the conversation. There is no more chance for them to change their mind, right? That's a huge thing. I have had multiple people. First thing is I've had so many people tell me no. For every photo that you see of mine, I've had at least 5 people tell me no, minimally. I mean, that's a stat that I'm coming up off the top of my head, but on about average, that's about what it is. Then on top of that, there are other photos that you may see where I've gotten a really compelling photo of somebody, but don't think that meant that the interaction started off that way. I've had plenty of people tell me no. And what I still do is I still offer up myself. I still have a good conversation with them. I am still human with them. I connect with them. And you will find in times that connection is really all that was missing in the beginning when you asked for the photo. And so what will happen is that because you continued on with that conversation, because you were able to discover more about your subject, the subject was able to discover more about you, you will find that they may be more open now to taking that photograph. And you can follow up the end of the conversation or the dwindling down of a conversation with maybe asking one more time. But what you'll also find is that when you make that connection with someone and they already know on the front end what you initially started it for. I've had people tell me, hey, didn't you want a picture? Why don't just take a quick one or take one now, or whatever it is. But you will find that when you continue on with genuinely being engaged and interested in the people that you're trying to photograph, that even sometimes when you're told no, that you'll get that photograph. So don't give up. Don't be overbearing. Don't be disrespectful, and don't soak up all of a person's space, right? But be encouraged to know that what this is, the basis of all this, sometimes will result in you getting what you wanted in the first place. Compassion and empathy. When we talk about the skills that you need to develop, or the things that you need to bring to these interactions, I can't think of anything that's more important. Compassion and empathy will surpass your technical skills with the camera, your talent as a photographer. These things will even supersede your natural ability to communicate with people. If you have compassion and you have empathy, you will find yourself in a good space. If you read the slide, I talk about the authenticity that breeds authenticity, right? People are very socially intelligent. And we're around human beings pretty much from the day that we're born. And so we can sense things about people, right? We have the ability to do that. And for the most part, we will get a sense of if someone's really being authentic with us, being genuine. It's a survival mechanism. And I think it's very important to realize that if you're not coming into a situation to really connect with people, they will sense it. There's also, when you talk about compassion and empathy, these are things that are going to guide your ethical and moral compass as a photographer. I speak frequently about photographers who are just going for a sensational photo. They are going for the shock and the awe of a photograph. And when you do that, sometimes you can lose track of, or at least vision of, the humanity of it, right? I really focus in on trying to bring out what is beautiful about my subject, regardless of what they look like physically, what condition they're in, their age, anything, any of the factors that can wear on people sometimes. It doesn't stop them from being beautiful. So part of the job that you're going to be doing is trying to figure out what's your route to unlock the beauty in this person and then capture that. That's a very huge responsibility, but it is the responsibility, I believe, of every photographer especially who's photographing people. We want to make sure to maintain people's honor, their dignity. We always want to make sure to maintain their humanity. We don't have the ability to give or take humanity away from people in the sense that we have ownership of their humanity, but we can create images and create narratives about people that can deny the access to other people who are viewing these people through our lens of this person's humanity. And so I believe that we can always strive to be dignified in our own actions, and through that we will be giving, paying homage constantly to the humanity of a human being and to the dignity of a human being. And this is important because we're creating lines of connectivity. We're helping people get closer to each other without some of the social barriers that can maybe stop that from happening. In one of the workshops I did years ago, I remember someone approaching me. This lady had approached me, and she had told me that the photographs she would see on my site and the stories that I would tell about people really made her question herself and how she dealt with people. Some of these folks she would probably walk right by or be scared to engage with or would never even think to engage with. But through some of the stories, she realized that there was a much more robust narrative about people and that we're not singular beings. And so it made her question, one, why she would look at certain people a certain way. And two, it made her more open to knowing that there was more behind people than just the face value. And so I think that's a very important thing as we look at ourselves as human beings in this country. We're in a very divided time in our country. We're in a very divided time globally, with conflicts all over the world, and these things aren't new. These are things that we of mankind have dealt with for our entire existence here. And so I believe that anything that we can do to decrease the distance in which we all exist around each other that's a life mission. It's critical, and we have the power to do it.
Hey, Brandon.
Yep.
I'm going to interrupt with one question here because it's relevant to the slide you have up there, and that is the delicacy of photographing children. I think we need to spend some time on how do you handle that?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and one I don't mind handling right now. Children, if there is, so children are tricky. I would say more times than not, there's an adult around a child. And if there's not an adult around and it's not other kids around, then you should probably be doing your job as the adult around to try to figure out, okay, where does this kid belong? Now, in saying that, you should always be asking permission from two people in particular, or two groups of people: the parents or parent of that kid, the guardian of that kid. So whoever is like, if it's an older brother or an older cousin, whoever is in charge of that kid, especially when you're talking about younger kids. And also you need to ask the kid, because the parents may be okay with the kid having a photograph taken. And then the kid may be like, no, I don't, no, thank you. And I think that sometimes it's hard to remember that these little people are beings all in of themselves, and that they deserve the same things that any of us would ask. If you walked up to an adult and they said, don't take my picture, you probably wouldn't push too much further than that. But we some reason forget to take a picture. I mean, to ask children. They live, they breathe, they think, they have wants, desires. All these things are inside of them, just the way they were inside of us. So there is a very delicate nature to that. But I say it's usually the most appropriate and best to start with the parents, or again, whoever is the guardian of that child. Now, say you come across a group of kids out and about. Maybe a little bit older, and they are doing something, or there's something about this group of kids that makes you want to photograph them. I would say go talk to them, get the photograph. If you can get a number for a parent or a contact for a parent, especially if you want to print the work or you want to post the work, do your due diligence, right? Do your best to get in contact with who is guarding this child, who is taking care of this child. And so maybe you have the photograph, but before it goes anywhere, you make sure that you've done all your due diligence to contact someone and explain to them, hey, I got a photo of your kid. I would love to give it to you. I would love to print it out for you, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways to make these photographs, not just for children, but advantageous for everybody, right? It's not often actually that people get a really nice and high quality photo of themselves. And so a lot of times too, which is a technique that I like to implement, is making sure that if I'm getting a photo, I mean, if someone's going to give me an opportunity to photograph them, that I give them the opportunity to get that photo. And rather I email it, or in certain cases where some people don't have email, you don't know how far it goes when you're dealing with someone maybe living out on the streets, that you photograph them and take them a print. take them a little small print or something of that nature. It goes a long ways. So yeah, when it comes to kids, I would say do your due diligence, be respectful, and give them all the same things that you would want for your child, for your little sister, little brother, what you would want for yourself as a child. Give to them. Best case scenario though is start with the parents, because not too often are kids just wandering around today. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Photography principles. So this is probably as technical as I will get in this particular talk. Is that we all know what the photography principles are. If you don't, it's always nice to look them up and study them, and different people will describe these things with different words, but for the most part they're all meaning the same thing. And I think the basis of it is color, light, and composition, right? But for this we have light and shadow, so exposure, rhythm. When we talk about rhythm in a photo, I describe it's like music. The rhythm is everything combined. It's the color, it's the light, it's the composition, it's the balance of the photo, all the things that are existing inside the photo. They create a rhythm. And so, there's a rhythm, or some people might describe it as a harmony, right? There is a harmony and a rhythm that exists inside a photo. A well-done photo has a very nice rhythm, just like music. And so when you're looking at your scene, when you're composing an image, think about how the image feels. Is it harmonic? And that doesn't mean it's a pleasant photo as far as everything happening inside of it is this picture perfect thing. What it means is that there are elements that are existing and cohabitating with each other inside of this frame that make the picture make sense to the human brain. Color. Color can be used to tell the story, right? There are certain colors that are going to engage with the brain in a certain way. It's going to make you feel something and feel different things. And there's also harmonies inside color, right? If you guys are familiar with the color wheel, there are certain colors that go well together. There's certain patterns of colors that go well together. And so try to look at that. Even in this photo here, this was actually taken, this is film, this is taken with Portrait 160. But the colors rendered very pleasant. And in this photo, I tried to think about, there are other photos around my subject when I shot this photo, but I tried to keep the frame as tight enough where I could only allow the viewer to see the colors that I wanted them to see, to keep a certain harmony inside the photo. And in doing that, these colors can tell the story. And color also plays into a lot of different things, like exposure. It impacts the rhythm of the photo. It impacts the balance and the composition of the photo. Balance, the viewer will feel it. I say that because when we're taking a photo of anything, we should be looking at balance. It's one of the most basic design principles, right? If you guys, anyone who designs websites or graphic design, or you make anything that's made, we want balance in it. And balance doesn't mean perfectly symmetrical, but what balance means is that the weight of the image feels right. If you look at the image, even on this slide, there's a certain weight to it. And if you were like, the way that balance was described to me in my very early days of being a graphic designer when I was in college, was if you were to take an image, what you designed, what you photographed, what you painted, and you were to put it on a flat plane and make it into a piece of paper, and you put a pin underneath that paper right in the middle, would it fall? Where would it fall off at? Or would it fall? Would it balance itself out? And so anytime I take a picture, anytime I was designing something, I would think about that in my head. Is the image I created balanced? If I took this thing and put it on a flat plane and try to balance it on a pin, where would it start to fall? And how can I correct that? Emphasis, what and who's the subject? In portraiture, this is really important because you don't want to take an image, it's supposed to be of a person and capturing the likeness of a person, and have so many other things going on in the photo that we can't quantify necessarily who is the subject that we're looking at. That would be a very poorly designed portrait. And so as we talk about emphasis as well, one of the ways to solve that very easily with portraiture is, one, to simplify your background, or two, which is something I like to utilize, is getting close to the subject. It creates intimacy. I like to be close to the people I'm photographing, and I like to bring the viewer close to the people I'm photographing. And so in that, it's very difficult in my photos to not know who the subject is. There are other forms of portraiture, especially as you start to go with different focal lengths or you are creating or designing different images, especially when you're in studio. But there are ways where you can have multiple things going on, but you can still always find a way to carve out your subject and all of that. Unity, the relationships happening inside the frame. This goes back into how we're composing our photos. Is there unity inside this? What's happening in the photo? How are the elements of the photo interacting with one another? And what is that telling us? How is that making our story a more fulfilling, a clearer, and more engaging story? And then movement. I always found it interesting as we talked about movement with photography, because we're typically talking about a still image. And even more literal, right? You can, if you're doing street photography or landscape photography, you can capture movement with changing shutter speeds and things like that. But literally, movement can come from an image where everything is static. The movement is more about how is your eye moving around the photo? How have we designed this frame for the viewer to start to move down this visual highway? Right. And this, again, all plays back into composition. This plays back into balance. And if we look at light and color and the emphasis, right, we are designing a sort of highway for our viewer to travel down. And so we always want to remember that. What kind of movement exists inside this photo? And, here's a couple different portraits taken of folks in different spaces. But there is a bit of all those elements we just talked about in each of these, where the frame is designed a certain way, the balance of the photo fits a certain way, the distance between the subject is a certain way. These are all done on purpose. And so when you're creating your image, do it with intent. Be saying something as you're using those elements. All those elements are being used to say something. And for me, as I go through my images and as I start to edit them, I may crop a little bit. I may play with the orientation that's a little bit different than what I necessarily captured right then. But again, those are only things that I'm using to, again, try to tell a more impactful story, maybe make my story clearer or strengthen those elements that we just talked about to accomplish the strengthening of the story. Now, these are the important principles, I think, when it comes to our photography as it relates to people. The human principles: love, compassion, empathy, authenticity, right? Those are the things that we talked about before. We want to put love into our craft, and we want to love the people that we are putting that energy into, right? And so we still can use all those principles to have the authenticity, to have the empathy, right? If you look at these subjects here, I can tell you right now, the conversations I had with all three of these people, they were not in the best places that they had been in their lives. But there was still a way to photograph them and have dignity, and to allow for their dignity, their humanity, to show them to be beautiful. And that's just paying attention. When people talk to you, don't tune them out until they say, okay, you can take my picture now. Listen to what they're telling you, listen to who they are, and in that you will find what you're looking for in really representing them well. Making someone beautiful is not you going into Photoshop and taking out their wrinkles and the dark circles under their eyes or all, any of that stuff. On the industry standard wise, as far as like model photography and fashion photography, yeah, you're talking about a whole different thing. But you don't have to do all that to make someone beautiful. Making someone beautiful in your image is just trying to represent them in a way that captures that light inside of them. Even if they don't have much of that light left, it's there somewhere. And I believe it's the job of a portrait photographer to find that. And even in your studio work, if you can find that, if you can engage with those things, if you use the principles that we've talked about, you will get a better photo out of your model, out of your subject, your actor, whoever it is that you're photographing. But on the street, it's essential. Because again, we want to take good pictures of people, not for the shock and awe value of the photo. There may be shock and awe there, but that's not what we're there to focus on. We're there to focus on the human being. And you know, I don't want to say that you have to love every person that you photograph. I mean, depending on where you're at or what kind of assignments you're getting or what you're, you know, who you're coming in contact with, there may not be something there for you to love in that person, but you can pour love into the photo, if that makes sense. Connectivity is huge. Finding a way to relate to your subject is crucial. I'm continually observing a subject to see what interests may be right in front of my own eyes. Sports teams, tattoos, a pet, anything. Find something to relate effectively. You are searching for an icebreaker. I think everyone in the room knows what the icebreaker is, right? It's when we come across a new person or we're in maybe a situation that it's not flowing, and we have that one thing that helps us all drop our guard. A joke, you know, effectively it's asking about the weather, right? Something that is not of the most importance, but is going to help us all bring our levels back down and just be two human beings. Connectivity is key. If you cannot connect with your subject, you're not going to get a photo. You're not going to get a compelling photo out of them. So be searching for that. If you see someone out on the street you want to photograph, look at what they're wearing. Maybe you guys have a favorite sports team. Maybe you guys have opposing. Maybe your teams that a team you like and a team they like are rivals. With this gentleman here, a story about him was, this is Thanksgiving Day, Skid Row 2018. And this guy was on the nod. He had told me he had just done some heroin, and I immediately gravitated to his tattoos. I have lots of tattoos. I love tattoos. I think that the walking story that is a tattoo is just interesting to me. And so I related to him on tattoos. I didn't know anything about him, but I just started talking. I asked him when he got his first tattoo. And I told him about when I got my first tattoo. And then we started talking about tattoos, and the conversation spread from there. But in that, I was able to get him alert, right? This guy looks alert and up and ready to go. Well, that is the exact opposite of what I experienced with him for 90% of my interaction. But for this 10% that we were talking about things that were interesting to him, and we started talking about his life, he had some issues back in his day with being involved with gangs and a few other things. But we were able to talk about things that were interesting to him, and we were able to talk about him, and he was important. And I was actively listening. I didn't tune him out. I didn't rush to, the punchline. Hey, can I take your picture? I let him talk, and I talked with him, and I shared with him my stories, and we connected as two human beings. And in that, what you see in this photo, I believe, even when I showed it to him, he looked at that picture, and he smiled and said, that's me. And what I took from that was that this guy doesn't get to see the best him very often anymore. I'm sure he looks in the mirror and sees a lot of things. He struggles with substance abuse issues. He has some mental health issues. He's living, out on Skid Row. These things are very difficult, but these are the realities for a lot of people. A lot of people that we walk right past every day. But the smile on his face and the pride this guy had, and this photo was after we had a conversation for a while, as he was reminiscing on his old self. I think the times that he really felt the best about himself. This is the photo. And what I saw here, and when I look at it, is I see him with his chin high. I see him with confidence. I see, you can almost kind of see a bit of a smirk in his face. Like he's finding himself again, even if it's just for a moment. And I think that's one of the powerful things about photography, and the powerful things about us seeing images of other people and images of ourselves. But this all started off a conversation about tattoos. Your icebreaker or the thing that you connect with can be anything. You just have to find, and you have to be an observer and look at people who you would like to photograph and figure out pretty quickly what it is about them that you can relate to. Again, sports teams are easy. We wear sports memorabilia, or if they have on like a jacket that has some sort of anime character that anything can be a topic for talking on. But you want to look at them and figure out what they're interested in, and then figure out a way that you can relate to that. And these are just a couple images of people who I had randomly met in different places on the planet and found a way to talk to them. I found a way to connect with them. I found a way to generate that connectivity with them and then capture it. And when you look at these photos, there it is. You can connect with these people, even though you've never met them before. There's a connectivity that comes from the connection that we were able to have for that brief moment that we were together. I don't talk about this any other place in the slide, but if you guys look at the slide to the right, where this woman has on a yellow wrap on her head, and the pillar behind her is yellow, and then she has on yellow gold. That's just to talk on that real quick. If you can find complementary colors around you, colors that are either matching or colors that are again harmonious, find those, and don't be afraid to ask your subject, hey, can you move over here? I like the way that this wall looks behind you, or I like, you know, the way that this scene looks here with you in it. So the photo of the young lady here with the orange hair is actually a very talented photographer. When I first met her, had no clue. She goes by the name of NYC Goblin, an amazing photographer, taken in New York. Photo of this man here. He's an elderly man here in Oakland that I randomly saw. And I just thought it was really, first of all, I love hats. I think hats always make an interesting story, but I love the fact to see him out with his mask on. It was a very telling thing, as we know, you know, our elderly population is very vulnerable to COVID. And to see this guy and talk to him and realize that as much as he would like to stay in, he still has to go get groceries. He still has to go handle all his own errands. He doesn't have a lot of people to just go in and have do things for him. And so the best thing he could do is put his mask on. For me, this photo says a lot about where we're at right now, with this virus ravaging the country, ravaging other places all over the globe. And then this woman here was in Cuba, out in a marketplace in Havana Vieja, and just struck up a conversation with her and started to piece together a couple elements that were going on. And I just loved it. And I asked her for a photograph. And after talking for a while, she allowed me to have one. Storyteller. Never forget that you are a storyteller. You are out there searching for an interesting story that you will try to create in like a few hundredths of a second. You are going to try to create a whole story out of that. So think about the elements around your subject and the elements on your subject: scars, clothing, objects, like instruments, clothing items. Again, can go back to what we talked about with like a sports team, or something that kind of points towards maybe an occupation that they're in. The entire portrait should be working at some sort of story or statement. So what I mean by that is, this story here was a very beautiful one to me. I was walking around Brownsville out in New York, and it's a very rough area. It's not a place that you would necessarily, at least to the outside world, be known for compassion and for love. You know, these are not the stories that most media outlets or people would tell about this particular neighborhood. But as I was walking through this neighborhood, I stumbled upon this young man's birthday. This was his first birthday. And what happened was that I had a camera in my hand. I was walking down the street, and his aunt pops out and she says, "How much do you charge?" And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Right. I carry the camera so much, sometimes I even forget that it's with me. It's like a part of me. So I go, what do you mean? She's like, I was supposed to get a photographer for my nephew's birthday. It's his first birthday. I couldn't get anybody in time. What would you charge to come take some photos? And I told her, you know what? I would give me a couple portraits and I'll take some photos and you can have them for free. No big deal. I can't stay here all day, but you know, I'll take some photos and I'll email them to you. And so I did. And in that, I was able to get this father and son together. And this photo was just really important to me. Growing up, I had my father in my life, and I knew other young men. I grew up in a very rough area as far as the city. And the story most of the times was that Black men were not around for their kids, especially as I was growing up in the 90s. That was the story we were told. That was the story that was put out. And I just knew that not to be true. I knew so many dads who were taking care of their kids and being part of their kids' lives and creating families and doing everything that they were supposed to do. And so to me, when I saw this image was just very important because it tells a story of a father that's there for his son, and it shows love, it shows compassion. There's just this huge sense. You can tell he's a proud father. This is his first son. This is his first kid. And there's pride there in his eyes. He's happy to be this kid's father. And just the stories that we tell about masculinity and how that plays out in certain neighborhoods and certain areas. I thought that this photo was just very important. And this photo is one of my favorites. This photo came from me connecting with an aunt who wanted photos done. So I took the time to stop, talk to her, offer to give up some photos for free. And in turn, I got this photo. which is just one of my most favorite photos that I've ever taken. And these are just more photos about telling a story. You know, find people who can generate that for you. You're going to be ultimately responsible for taking a photo that lends to a story, but find that story, find that person that has a story written on their face a bit, and then go from there. Observation and patience. These things are important. Looking for the right subject is a game of patience. Interesting photographs, particularly portraits, come from interesting subjects. Find someone walking around with a story and you will have an easier time compelling the viewer to dig deeper. And so what I mean by that is find that person who has something that grabs you. And if they grab you, they'll probably grab your viewer, and then you're able to thrust the viewer even deeper into what this person actually is, more so than just whatever they look like. The patience aspect comes in from this particular photo. I was taking a portrait of another person out in New York one day, and this guy walks by. Now, I wanted to like stop him, talk to him, say, hey, like, wait, I gotta photograph you. But I did not want to break the connection I had with the person I was photographing. And so, you know, I had to really be disciplined and still being engaged with the person I was photographing, as to be respectful of them, as to be committed to them with the commitment they were giving to me by allowing me to photograph them. And so I had to just kind of bite the bullet and stay where I was at. But I managed to get this photograph for this young man because I just kept walking around the area hoping I was going to run back into him. And mind you, this is in the middle of New York. It's a busy place. People are going any and everywhere. And I didn't know if I was going to find him again, but I gave it the effort. I just kind of kept walking around the area, and I ran into him at a park. Like an hour later, I ran into him at a park, and he was talking to some buddies of his, and I got engaged in the conversation with all of them, and took photos of everybody there, knowing that I wanted a photograph of him. But I built a rapport with everyone. I didn't single him out. I didn't come there and say, hey, I just need a photo of you and I can run. I stayed there and I talked, and I became part of that group for that moment. And so when I asked to take photographs, people we had already done all that front end work that we were talking about, built the rapport and really connected with them. And I was able to get this photograph of him. And again, when you look at it, it tells a story. You're compelled to know more about this guy. You want to know more about his story. And that's the power of one, observing what's going on around you, and two, being patient. And these are more just photos of observing folks that I knew I was going to want to get a photo of, and being in an area and being patient, taking my time. The gentleman on the left, I think his story is really important, because if you can look in the foreground, although it's out of focus, what he's holding is papers that he's written and written and written over and over and over. And he had a stack of hundreds of papers that he carries with him. This man suffers from schizophrenia, a very advanced form of schizophrenia. And again, this goes back to how we photograph people with dignity, right? He was talking to himself. He was a bit of a mess. I got engaged with him by offering to buy him some food. We were sitting out front of a cafe. And from there, I just talked to him. I didn't placate with him. I really engaged with him and just tried to find out as much about his story as I could. And as he struggled to tell his story, obviously, because he had a lot of things going on, but I was able to get this photograph of him. And what I love about this photograph is when you see this, you don't look at him and go, he's crazy, he's a schizophrenic, he's wild. I didn't take a sensational photo of him. I didn't take a shock and awe photo of him. I wanted to take a photograph that represented the man that I have found at his most deepest self, as far as I could get. And there, I believe, if you look at his face, there's honor, there's dignity in this man. You can see he was a handsome guy, right? And I think that that's important. You don't have to make people look bad for people to want to look at your photos. And I think that's a really important thing, especially when we talk about street portraiture and street photography. You can go into neighborhoods and document the lives, bring to other people's attention the lives of people who are living really hard and who are struggling, who have substance abuse issues, who have mental health issues, and who are all trying to get better in any of the ways that they know how. You can tell those stories without going there and making those people look bad. You can really engage with them. You can pour love into the photo. And if you're doing the responsible thing, you can pour love into that community. Ask people what they need. You need clothes, you need food, you need water. What are you guys not getting? What can be better? And engage with them. And I think that you'll find a much more enriching experience. And I think,
Brandon,
yes,
let me jump in here with a technique question while you've got these slides up.
sure.
Pretty sure every picture you've shown has been in pretty much soft light. Do you avoid hard light out of personal taste, or just you hate contrast? Want to talk about that?
So my particular taste when it comes to street portraits is that it's very hard to control light getting into the eyes. And so when you have hard light, it makes that problem even more difficult. And I think it's very important to engage with the subject's eyes. Now, later on in the slide, I do have some photos that are a little bit more contrasty, but you know, just like when you're in the studio, there's so many things that you have to do when you're using hard shadows to make sure that you're still getting a nice soft light that creates gentle transitions throughout skin tones and the complexion of a person. So I usually look for a way to get out of hard light. Some of these photos are taken in the middle of the day, but what I'll do is find a place where I can get to where I have a little bit of cover, or I'll even use, I have one of those like 3-in-1 little circular modifiers where there's a reflector on one side, or gold reflector on one side, a diffuser in the middle, and like a silver reflector on the other. And so if I can't find something to sort of soften the light, I'll actually hold a diffuser in the over the area where the sun is coming or the most harsh light is coming in at, to just break that light apart a little bit and create a softer light.
Can I follow that up with another technique question?
Sure.
This was actually somebody asked about it. So do you tend to poach at certain locations that you've become familiar with, or are you just walking up and down all the time?
It's interesting. It just depends on my mood. There are go-to locations that I like to be at, because I think when I go there, I'm going to get like a really diverse group of folks in certain communities. But also, I mean, if I don't have a lot of time and I want to come in contact with the most diverse group of people I can, I usually go into a downtown area. So for me, downtown Oakland, or I'll go to downtown LA or downtown San Francisco. Almost any downtown area you go, in most major cities, you're going to get just a little bit of everything and everybody. And so for me, that's usually pretty fun. But I do have my go-to places that I like to get out to. And one of the things for me is that I've photographed in Oakland long enough to be able to go to certain places and know that I'll run back into people. And so I can kind of check in on folks and see how they're doing, see what they need, or just to see a familiar face. Variation. So like this photo here is a little bit more contrasty. I was able to utilize a wall that was to the right of him to create a negative fill, and then I had a very soft light source coming from a rainy day across the other side of his face. And so I don't mind contrast. It's just it's more important to me how much I can control those elements, because I always want to get a photo that captures as much detail as possible. And sometimes when you're in contrastier environments, you can maybe lose some of that detail. So that's just a personal preference of mine. So once you've done the hard work of gaining the trust of your subject and breaking down all the social barriers, make sure to get your photo and make sure to get it right. You did the work, don't let it be for nothing. What do I mean by this statement? This is all taken on the same exact day with the same lens, same camera, same subject, same moment. When I first started taking street portraits, I would be nervous like anyone else. And I would finally get to the point where I could take their picture, and I would just take the picture and I would go. For me, it was just the actual act of getting the photo. But what I would go back and do later was review the photos, and like the eyes would be out of focus unintentionally, or the composition wasn't very good, or I was too far away and so I didn't get as much detail in the photo as I wanted, or just that it was lackluster. It could have been better. I was so tied into getting the photo that I didn't think about getting variations of the photo. So I go back. Here we go. So I wouldn't think about asking for multiple photos or even taking multiple photos. I would just try to get the photo and get out of there. So take your time. Once you have the subject, you have them. Be respectful of their time. Don't keep them there for 30, 40 minutes of just the photo aspect of it. If they want to talk to you for 30, 40 minutes, that's great. But be respectful of their time. But once you have them, don't lose the moment by not getting the good photo. You've done all the hard work and people are going to be slightly patient with you. You've developed that rapport with them. Now, again, they don't want to be out there all day, but you can ask them for a couple of photos. You can ask, you can go from different angles. One of my things that I really try to accomplish is creating studio-like feelings in the street. So lighting, composition, a feel, the emotion. You can direct people. You can ask them. You can place them in certain spots as far as emotionally or psychologically. You can talk to them and kind of have an idea of where maybe there's some breadcrumbs you want to lead them down a path of. Now, where they end up, you can't control that, but you can be active in creating the photo and creating this image. So, like I said, just in this particular image, and these are just a couple, but I took a few different shots of this young man. And they came out this way, but this was a guy I just saw at a restaurant. I saw him outside at a restaurant I was getting food at, and I took these photos. So it's not a plan. This was not a stage or planned shoot. I did not know him before taking these photos, but I took my time. Once I got to know him and once we talked, I took my time and I got the photos that I needed.
Hey, Brandon, I know you, I interrupted twice, but we're an hour in. Do you, how many more slides do you have?
I just have, this is the last little bit. It'll take like less than 2 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. This one is image matters. The lives of these people you photograph matter. Never take for granted the power of a photograph and what it can mean. What I mean by this is that these people have stories that are sometimes very grueling and brutal and hard to hear, but they're important. I'll kind of go through these a little quick. Atsed is a domestic violence survivor from Ethiopia. And I happened to find out her story from a lady I knew who was her sponsor here in America. And Atsed had left her husband who had been abusive, and he had taken her kid. And when he ran back into her, he threw acid into her face, causing this massive amount of damage, almost killing her. And this image of Atsed, again, I tried to find the best ways to represent her beauty, because when you meet her, there's just this certain like peacefulness, internal beauty, and this confidence that's infectious about her. And you can't help but feel good around this woman. And so I wanted to make an image that felt like that. And with everything that she's been through and that she's still going through, she's a very inspiring person. And this image made it all the way back to Ethiopia, and her ex-husband, who is actually a federal police officer in Ethiopia and who had kind of gotten away with this, this image and the series of images actually got a lot of people interested again in what was going on, and they started looking into that investigation again. This gentleman is Ken. I met Ken while doing a workshop in San Francisco. We just started talking. We started talking about beards. He has one, I have one, and we both were admiring each other's beards, and that was my end. And I started talking to Ken. Ken was he trains professional athletes. He was a martial artist, a really amazing and just gentle, kind guy. And Ken and I had plans to get together and do some photos of him doing some martial arts to advertise to his clients. It never happened. Weeks before we were supposed to get together, Ken was in a car accident and killed instantly. And I never knew what happened until some of his some of the folks who had saw this photo had started reaching out to me to get this photo, and they explained to me what had happened. And to them, this photo and a couple other photos I took to them are very important because they felt like it represented Ken really well, and some of the last photos of Ken that they have. And this photo is Brittany. This is my younger sister. She passed away in August of breast cancer. And this photo is one of my most precious possessions. And it meant something when I took it. It was a nice portrait when I took it. But after she passed, this photo became one of the most important photographs I'd ever taken. it will be one of the most important photographs I ever take. This was actually a little bit after she was growing her hair back out after chemo, and she just looked so beautiful to me. And this image was very much a reflection of just who she was. Very strong, very beautiful, a kind person, a powerful presence. And these photos mean something. They may just seem like a photo at the time, but none of us are here forever, and we leave behind loved ones, we leave behind legacies, we leave behind stories. And so when you take these photographs, realize that you are taking a snapshot of somebody's life, and that the photo can mean the world. So that is the end of the presentation on my end. I'm open for questions. I've left my my Instagram handle as well as my email address. Please reach out to me if you guys have questions that we can't answer during this session, or if you just want to talk photography.
All right, I've been writing down questions as people have been typing them in. So let me plow into some of these. I guess some basic sort of, people do have equipment and technique questions, like do you auto exposure, manual exposure, and do you have some favorite lenses?
I will start with exposure. I do manual exposure. I mean, auto exposure in cameras today is pretty smart, but I like to have as much control as possible, because again, different exposures are going to tell different stories within the frame. Lenses, I am very traditional in the sense that I'm a portrait photographer. I love things 50 millimeters and above. Obviously, when we're talking Fuji or any crop body sensor, those change a little bit. But for me, I work within the 56 millimeter space with the Fuji lens. I love the 50 millimeter 1.0 that came out, to have a camera that fast, and just everything that comes out of the lens that fast, and everything that comes out of it's just really beautiful in the way that it renders the different different transitions inside the photo are wonderful. And then the 90 millimeter 2.0 is probably one of my most favorite lenses of all time. Any camera system I've ever had, I've always had a 135 millimeter lens for it, or the equivalent to that space. I just think that to be able to get that type of compression and have that focal length with also the speed at 2.0, I think even some manufacturers make things at like a 1.8 now. It's powerful to be able to do that, to be able to sort of cut your subject out of a background. It almost doesn't matter how busy it is at that range. The compression's so nice that you can create a very smooth, fluid, in particular background out of anything. So.
I think you did mention something about giving prints to subjects. How do you go about doing that? I mean, how do you go about finding somebody else? And how, like, yeah,
So
or do you send digital copies, or what do you do?
Yeah, so for people who have emails, I'm always willing to send a digital copy, which is always nice. People, you'll see the photos like pop up on LinkedIn or something like that, or their Instagrams. But some folks don't have email, or they don't always have access to be able to get service to their phone to get an email, or get access to a place where they can get to a computer, especially now where so many things are closed. And so one thing that can really make someone's memory of being photographed by you stand out is get the photo printed and go back to that neighborhood and try to find them, or ask them when you take the photo, hey, how can I find you again? They'll tell you, I'm usually hanging out at X, Y, and Z, or I have a place over here at this hotel for a little bit, whatever it is. And that's also the benefit of frequently visiting certain places, is that when you come back to that neighborhood, you walk that area, you'll run into these people again.
So the last 6 months, as we know, have been a little weird, or last 9 months. How do you go about approaching people you're not allowed to approach? And what do you do with masking? Are you asking people to lower their masks for a photograph, or what?
So now that's a tricky one. I think for a lot of street photographers, particularly street portrait photographers, it's been something of a new landscape to traverse, because how do you create that connectivity with people that you're supposed to be at least 6 feet from, or that you can't see their face, so that they can't see your face? for me, it's been the times that I go out, I always have a mask on, and I go out a very limited amount these days. I have a newborn, so you know, I'm very particular about making sure that I don't put, you know, anyone in my household at risk. But also, yeah, it changes things a bit. You can go out and talk to people. I've gone out and talked to people and have stayed my distance. They stay their distance. But you want to take all the safety protocols. And if you do happen to be, you know, in a space where you're willing to get closer and they're willing to let you be closer, you know, be smart about it. Let's not, you know, don't shake hands, don't give hugs and things like that. You know, if you have to be that close and you want to make some sort of contact, you know, everyone's doing the elbow bump now. But just being cognizant of what you're doing, being respectful of what you're doing, and also realizing that if you are out in the street and you're photographing folks who are struggling, like they may not be, if they were to get something from you, they may not have all the resources to get better from it. And so you really need to be cognizant of what you're doing and be smart about it. And this also comes into when you talk about using longer focal lengths. This is when a 90 comes in real handy for me. Right? I don't have to be on top of someone to create an image that's very dynamic and still feels close. And that also can make someone feel more comfortable in being photographed by you. In regards to the mask, I think that some of the images are great to get the photo with the mask still, right? That's telling the story of what's happening today, right now. But if you have someone who's willing to peel their mask down for a second, have them peel the mask down, get the photo and get their mask back up. You know, even if they're willing to be maskless, you want to feel good about what you're doing. And again, this goes into the ethics of this, right? Are you being responsible? Are you putting people at risk? And what type of things are you doing to keep people safe?
Did have one interesting question here is, we talked about you shooting in soft light, which I think has a lot to do with this, but anything you want to say about managing skin tones to get them nice and smooth and pretty looking?
Practice makes perfect. You know, it took me a long time of playing with color to find the tonality that I enjoy working within. But it's a journey that I think everyone is going to have to go through individually. The harder the light is, obviously the more extremes you're going to have with transitions, right? So when you work in soft light, that's why we put these big soft boxes in front of people and big beauty dishes in front of people on film sets and inside the studio. We want to create this, large light sources that are breaking up the light in a very pleasant way. And so when we're out and we can find softer light sources out in the streets, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to create a more pleasant tonality to the skin tones. But I would say study your color, and think about one concept of the way color works is not going to work on every skin tone. It's not going to work. You can't say that this works the best for any group of people because there's so much range in skin from all of us. And you have to just kind of be patient and play around. I would say the best thing is experimentation. See what works, see what looks the best, see what makes that person look their best.
There was something you mentioned at one point. You said the word assignments. And are you talking about street photography or as assignments, or are you talking about using street photography to help you with assignments?
More so the latter, using these things that we're talking about to help you when you're on assignment. Because the reality is that if you are on assignment as a photojournalist taking portraits, you're going to be coming across the same thing. You're going to have a limited window of time. You're going to be probably dealing with someone you don't know anything about. Or not that you don't know anything about. If it's an assignment, you know something about them, but that you don't know personally. And you're going to have that icebreaker, and you're going to have to get connected with that person to be able to get the best photograph that you can from them with, again, not a lot of time. So there's a lot of things I found very similar when it comes to taking on assignments and how I've been able to utilize the things I've learned in street photography while on assignment.
Where did you come to, how did you get into photography?
Oh man, I got in, before photography, I was a graffiti artist. I did a lot of graffiti where I was at, and I had always been an artist. I painted when I was a kid, and I did charcoal work and ink drawings, and I was into comic books and all that type, things like that. So I would just come up with stuff that were more sci-fi based. I got into graffiti art for a long time, and I just my parents gave me a little easy share Kodak point and shoot camera while I was in college, and I just started taking photos of my friends and what was going on around us at the time. And I just caught the bug. There's no other way to explain it. There was something about photographing and documenting people's lives that was cool to me. And as I got older and it became more mature, with my understanding of life and my understanding of art, it just seemed to make sense. It seemed to be the way I was most impactful and the most, it actually gave me the most flexibility to tell stories that I wanted to tell. And I like people, so it gave me an opportunity to really interact with people, because so many other times the other types of art that you're doing can be very solo ventures.
We probably need to wrap up. It's 4:15. Some people have asked about the presentation. We're not recording it. Sammy's is. Sammy's is popping back on there.
Yep.
David,
we will be sending an email out with the link for the video once we get it all edited and cleaned up in a couple of days. So once the event is over, you'll be getting one more thank you email from us and the links to the various classes that we've been presenting.
All right. Well, thanks much, Brandon.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for everybody for attending.
Thank you for the team from FujiFilm and Brandon, just an amazing, emotional, insightful presentation. It got the hairs on my arms coming up a little bit on the back of my neck as well. Some of those images were just so great.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And thank all of you for joining us for our Sammy's Photo School Holiday Education event. A reminder again, Sammy's stores are open. We're practicing social distancing protocols for in-store shopping, touchless curbside pickup for those who are interested in that service. And as always, 24/7 on Sammys.com for all your holidays and photographic needs. We got a bunch of great deals on Fujifilm cameras and lenses and accessories going on all throughout the season. So please check our website, our site, or stop by one of our stores, and we'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and have a great holiday season. We'll see you soon.
Thank you,
Hey,
everybody.
Brandon.
Yes.
Brandon, check out the chat. There's some really wonderful comments in there.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to check it out
Absolutely.
right now. Again,
Very
Yeah,
well
before we
received.
turn it off, take a look, because it's really heartfelt to read what some people have written. And I don't want you to miss that.
okay, awesome. I'm going to go through it right now.
You're very
Okay, David, don't
inspirational.
shut it
Yeah.
off.
Okay. you
Again,
got it.
thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Be well.
Thanks, David.
Brandon, great work, man.
Thank you, Tone. I know that voice
Yep.
anywhere, man.
Yes, sir. My man.
Is David Herman still on there? We had a gentleman on named David Herman, and he teaches our street photography class for us. So
Oh,
I think he was doing a little check and compare.
He chimed in early on in the presentation. So
Yeah.
Loved every image, Brandon. That was so touching, emotional. Filled
Oh,
with,
thank you.
I
Thank you.
just-
I mean, there's so much that we learn from each other and can gain from each other. And I honestly, when I really was going through some, even now with losing my sister, I've been able to lean on photography very, very much so. And years ago, when I really got into street portraiture, I realized that that human interaction was super important to even the ways in which I was healing. And, the folks I was talking to, they had no clue, but they were giving me so much more than what I was giving them.
Yeah, it shows in your work. It's just, you really look deep. Almost made me want to cry a few times.
The thing is too, it shows you how to be, because sometimes we're out there and we're photographing people who don't have much. And it really makes you check yourself as we start complaining about things, even really huge things. Where I grew up, I've lost a lot of people, just kind of the nature of where I was from. And even in losing my sister, you can start to feel like it's raining on you, so to say, right? But then when you talk to other people, you realize that you're experiencing things that other people are, and you're not alone. And that feeling of not being alone can be so huge in your healing. you know, you give yourself space to heal through that. But when you feel like you're on an island, it can just really be detrimental to your health, you know.
Hey, Brandon, when the big fires were going up there in Northern California, did you go out into the streets during that period and use that as a backdrop?
I did, and I actually covered a few assignments here in the Bay Area for a couple of news places, and it was interesting, the tonality, like the tone of it. You could just, there was fire. You could tell, you know, that even without editing the photo at all, just the orange sky, you know. There was one morning where we all woke up, the sun didn't come out. I mean, it stayed dark all day, and it was, it looked like something out of Blade Runner. I remember sending a friend a text on the East Coast and saying, it's like Blade Runner out here, you know, and I showed him a picture from in front of my house. And then I showed him I took a screenshot of a picture from a still from the movie. And it was just incredible to see. And obviously we're having, you know, having more and more fires out here. It's just, it's just nuts, man. These messages really mean a lot. Thank you everybody who sent these.
It's really nice.
And yeah, whoever asked for Chris, I did meet Atset through Minby. Minby is an amazing person, and that is who I met Atset through.
Can you save the chat?
Yeah, I was trying to see. I think I can actually. Hold on.
Oh
no, I don't know. That would be to add a file. Let's see.
Yeah, save chat. I've got it here.
Oh yeah, I see it too. I'm chat save, show info. Okay, wonderful. I have it. Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna go through all that, and then yeah, anybody who has questions I couldn't answer, please feel free to email me. I left my email there. So
Awesome. Thank you. This was so special. It's really,
Very
really
much so.
wonderful.
again, really humbled and just honored you guys. Thank you for having me. Fuji, always a pleasure. You guys are family, and Sammy, you guys are family now too. So thank you.
We
Aw.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Hey, be safe out there, okay?
Definitely.
Proud to have you as an extra photographer, Brandon.
Oh man, I never thought that would happen. It's been crazy to see where, if you would ask me, you know, 10 years ago, or even ask the kid self of me, like if I was to be able to be a professional artist, I would never imagine photography. You know, it would have been something else, the other things I was working in. So, you know, it's being open to just moving forward, trying to do good work and moving forward.
Yeah, comes from the heart, you can tell.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, happy holidays to everyone.
Be well.
Everyone,
Take care, Brandon.
Thank
We'll
you
talk
again.
soon. Bye.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Take care.